Ben, this is awesome. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you and have a chance to really hear your full journey.
Well, thanks. And I hope it's worth our time.
I'm sure it will be. So talk to me a little bit, before you end up being a Super Bowl NFL player at the highest level and the work that you're doing today at University of Arizona, which I also attended and have a deep love for. So we have a lot in common, but I'd like to go back as we do on this podcast and really start at the beginning. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your upbringing, where you're from, what your family dynamic was like, anything that really jumps out from an early age.
Wow, there's a lot there. It's I'm the youngest of 6 children. Father, born in one shack in Texas, a one-room shack. Actually born in the kitchen, which was just all it was a curtain drawn across the place. World War II vet, Korea vet. Mom, orphaned early. By the time she was 16, both of her parents were passed. So I don't know that they had a real good understanding, and they did the best they could and provided a great home for me. And when you're the youngest of 6, you tend to fight a little bit. You tend to be a little bit of an entertainer in order to cope with the things that are going on around you. Because I kind of forget, in that birth order, where do you have to be? And there's fights going on, there's things that happen, and you kind of figure out your way. And for me, it was, I kind of stayed hidden because I was so young compared to like my older brothers. And now that I know a lot more about birth order, I can really make a lot of sense of it, is that I was in some ways, I went from the youngest child to the oldest male simply because they aged out of the household and I moved into the household more. And I know that sounds odd, but when your older brothers are 15, 16 years older than you, that's the dynamic that it plays. And I was always a good athlete, but I really struggled through adolescence because my interests stayed. I always say this about men. Women look at a guy and they don't understand why he likes certain things. It's because I like everything I liked at 12. I still do. I still love everything I liked at 12. I like some other things now. I've gotten a little more sophisticated in some things, but man, if it's a car, if it's a cool game, I'm in. I want to play. That's who I am, and I can't help that. And so that going into adolescence and kind of, I call it the popcorn theory, and I've heard that once before, and I always liked it. Is when you do a whole pan of popcorn, not every kernel pops at once. And the way our systems are set up from middle school and high school in sports and in education is they have to go to the main group. So kernels pop real early and they kind of burn out. A whole bunch, they really do well academically and they go off to college. And there's guys like me. I was one of those guys that popped kind of after the thing came off and they had served everybody, and I popped out then. So I was a little too immature to play sports in high school. I grew in high school, and I eventually got to where I could have played in high school. But my freshman year, sophomore, even in my junior year, I was a pudgy kid. I was not particularly suited for the game of football or any sport for that matter, being yelled at. And I shouldn't say that. I should be being coached. But at that time, I thought being yelled at.
Sure, yeah.
There's a lot of maturing that goes on. And I had to grow up on my own as that youngest kid, which means my parents were pretty much done with being parents. And God bless them, I love them. They gave me everything I could ever ask for as far as a home. But I knew I had to make my way through college. There was no money there. I being a little more immature, I was kind of a nerd and a geek. And those things end up driving you as you mature because you have that chip on your shoulder. And I've since really come to grips with it all, realized it was all me. It was none of my friends. It was none of the exterior things doing this. It was all me. But you end up thinking, I've got to go to college. I'm going to play football. I'm going to become the toughest guy I can become. And people will see that they misjudged me. When really they didn't misjudge me. I just didn't show myself. And So that was kind of in a nutshell what happened. Youngest a kid, lost in the shuffle, emotionally and physically a little bit immature in high school and middle school, and kind of felt out of it, nerdy, or however you would call it. We make a lot of movies for guys like us, way over here, and I had to find my way out of it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I don't want to just kind of move over that too fast. I mean, I think that is really an important message for people to hear, knowing that you did find your way out of it. But oftentimes, I think kids are told, or they take on at least, I'm not good at something, especially as it pertains to certain things. I guess maybe it's everything, but it can be the arts for sure. Oh, I'm not a good artist. Oh, I can't sing. Oh, I'm not good at that sport. Or, oh, I'm not big enough. I'm too fat. I'm too this. I'm too that. It could be math. It could be a subject. I'm not. And those are kind of stories that I think people really attach to and really live into. It sounds to me like, despite this, kind of being left, to lost in the shuffle a little bit, I think is how you described it, and really not kind of knowing who you were, which most people don't at an early age, you were able to find it. Talk to me a little bit about how you found it. I mean, what was that like? What was and maybe before you get to how you found it, how hard was it actually in the moment?
Emotionally and socially, really tough, because really good friends. I'd always been a really good athlete, and then all of a sudden I wasn't. And I always loved to read. I've always been really into history. And I think it was like my 8th grade year. I think it was probably my 8th grade year. A friend of mine, they got into Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, okay, the game's fun, but I don't love it. I want to actually hit people for real. And I had happened to see a club that did that. So I was not able, and I'll say it was my own fault. I just wasn't mature enough to go out and play football. But I found this group that accepted everybody. And it was really cool to be included in something with a whole bunch of people that you wouldn't know were so successful. And so I went into this club. It was an enactment club where, you got in armor and smashed each other about. Is way better than Dungeons and Dragons, which was just fantasy. This was real. You got to actually hit people and smash them. And in there, what I learned from that is I learned you start finding out what you're good at in life. And if you stop worrying about what you can't do and start worrying about what you can do, it's kind of amazing the growth that happens. And for me, those high school years, because I wasn't physically tall of stature or muscular until later on, I found that I listened pretty well. I learned, I could really read. I found I could communicate with adults because I'd always had to, being the youngest. I'd always been around adult conversations. And so I didn't, kind of the thing that set me apart from the high school crowd is that I wasn't interested in the high school conversations. I was always interested in the more mature and adult conversations, which kind of sucks because I missed out on a lot, obviously. But when I look back at it, because I look at my own kids, I'm like, wow, that would have been fun to do. But I didn't get a part of that. Mm-hmm. But I found my strength was these conversations I had with adults and learning from, they were able to be mentors. And a friend of mine in this group happened to be a district attorney. And he was he was actually younger than my older brothers. But he was just really good at talking with me and kind of hearing who I was and mentoring me through this process. And he'd have me over for dinners, things like that, where I could kind of see a whole nother light in people. What it did is it taught me so much, not only about myself, but then to never look at a person and assume that there's nothing about them that's worthy of being respected. And once that really opened doors for me as I moved along and that really set the stage for, I guess, my emotional maturity. And then my junior year, I started getting big and strong. My senior year, I got bigger and stronger. Into my first year outside of high school and having to go to college, all of a sudden I had a body that matched kind of my interest and who I was mentally at that point. But those two things were very different for a long time.
Yeah. And I think, in my own life, and I think this is often true, it's those difficult struggles, those kind of painful experiences that really end up, people say they shape you, they make you who you are. And I think sometimes that's a little bit misleading in that, yes, they do that, but what they really do is they open doors for you because you can see where there are problems that you've dealt with and where you might want to solve those problems. So when I hear you say you kind of get to look at people differently now because you know what might be under there, as maybe you were overlooked at times, that's like a real opening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at there's no one perspective other than maybe on a computer screen that's two-dimensional. But so many things need to be looked at multiple perspectives, and I really found that out by what you just said. It's multiple ways. I learned a lot about other people and not taking them for granted, and finding out what was respect. There might be this person that the average world might go, what a loser, working at a donut store. He's 32 years old, but you go to his house and he's a world-class instrument maker. Mm-hmm. But in order to make ends meet between building mandolins for rich people, which he gets thousands of dollars for, he wants a job and he works at a donut store. Mm-hmm. So there's this thing where there's a lot of levels to people we don't always look at because we're not always privy to that. But this really allowed me that, and it allowed me to just understand that what you see out of everybody is not necessarily who they are. Mm-hmm. But I realized when they saw me in high school, they didn't know any of this about me back there. So, and you're right. It was painful. I kind of feel, for a long time, I held such a chip on my shoulder about my high school experience and things that went on. And I just don't anymore. It's like, I think I feel like I know who I am. It was an opening to figure out more about myself.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the chip on your shoulder. How did that kind of serve you or hold you back? I don't know how long that lasted because, it does seem like you eventually started to get quite a bit of attention from some, really great schools. So, when you had the chip on your shoulder, tell me a little bit more about that.
I had the chip on my shoulder till probably 10 years ago or less.
Yeah.
Well, after I retired, mm-hmm. you don't get rid of that type of thing easily. Going through an emotional transformation and physical transformation, and then everything from being a social outcast kind of in high school. And let me make a caveat there. My best friend in the world was the best football player in the state and maybe the country at this time. And we've stayed friends, but nobody else, and that emotional trauma or whatever, and I hate to I'm not a victim. It was my own doing. Mm-hmm. It was, that sticks with you, and you want to prove to people they had you wrong all along. Because here I was, best athlete to worst athlete, social kid to unsocial kid, and there's other emotional baggage that happens with that. Family dynamics, all these things that draw into, or that draws from. But what you have to do, and kind of that chip that drove me then, was to prove people wrong, to prove that I was still a good athlete, that I was smart, and it's still, I shouldn't even say I've lost it in a lot of areas in my life, but it still drives me to this day sometimes. It gives you a fuel when things get a little dark. Maybe you're not doing as well as you think. Say, no, I know I can do this. I'm good at this, and I'm going to prove X wrong. And it's not healthy. It really isn't. But it does, in some ways, you can manifest it for a healthy way. And that's what I did with football for me, was to manifest it in that way.
Yeah. Well, I think this is an interesting subject just to spend a little bit more time on, because I think you kind of said a lot there relative to this chip, that you got rid of it. And then you maybe rephrase that you never really get rid of it. You got rid of it in a lot of areas, right? And I think this is very true. This is kind of the human experience, and I think there's a level of awareness that really comes in and maybe continues to come in to see where it still might be there. And I'm also really intrigued with the idea that sometimes, and I guess my belief is really, it's always there for our benefit. And there is it is serving you really, even if it wasn't going to serve you forever. It was kind of what you needed to do at the time. It was just where you were at the time, and it wasn't wrong or bad. And I guess I'm sitting here thinking, well, there's no way that chip on your shoulder didn't take you, at least in part, to 5 Super Bowls, right?
It did.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so not all bad, right? But the
No.
secret is like, how do you figure out when it's serving you and when it's not?
That is a battle to this day. And that's a great point. Thank you. Because I can look back and go, that served me well in football and in locker rooms. It served me well in broadcast. That edge to always want to do better and prove people wrong. But it can manifest itself in ways that are damaging to me, in that when I'm in a conversation and I refuse to let something go simply because I know in the back of my mind I'm right, and I'm going to get them to believe I'm right. I don't have to get them to believe I'm right. And I have to look at it that way. I have to become more aware of when it's not serving me for the purpose or for a good purpose. It's serving me at the detriment of what others might think of me and or my personal angst that goes on inside. I can get rid of that. Say, I don't have to win this one. I can let this one go. And that is where I need to get better. I'm trying. Compared to 15 years ago, way ahead of the game, but it's still there.
Yeah. Well, no, and I appreciate you acknowledging that, because I think it's very honest. I mean, I think this is a life's work. These are things that, we may never really master, but we're constantly working on them. A work in progress is kind of how I've phrased that. So you're kind of coming through and using this experience now, and your physical is catching up, I guess, now, and you start to get some attention and decide that you want to play college football, and you can, right? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, working as a bouncer, being a big kid, surfing, all the things that make you an athlete, I was doing. And I was playing basketball against ex-NBA guys. And at some point you realize this is not the way to get to college. And, there was no money for college for me, as I stated prior. But so how was I going to get from junior college, which was somewhat affordable, but very hard to do while bouncing, to college, which is, I couldn't have worked my way through college. It would have taken me 12 years. Luckily at that time, I had a friend say he was going to go out for football. And I think he wanted me there because he thought he'd be way better than me. I'd be the last guy on the roster. And I had a friend playing at Stanford who heard me, and we talked about it. He said, you should do it. And I had some NFL, the Rams used to come around where I played basketball, where I worked all the time. And they saw me and said, why aren't you doing something? And when somebody of that magnitude, who's a professional, and somebody who's playing at Stanford says, you need to do this, you start to think, okay, I'm not just playing at the courts against guys. I actually am as good as I think I am, or I'm as athletic as I think I am. So it popped in my head. I was looking at Golden West Junior College, which is where I was going, and I saw guys getting scholarships. And I was like, I played basketball. That guy can't move. And yeah, they're going to, I don't know, Carroll College, Montana. They're going to, Eastern Oregon. But that didn't matter to me. I saw a degree, and I looked at the money and the hours of bouncing it would take me to get that degree, and thought, this has got to be my ticket. And I walked in and I met the head coach. I said, I think I want to play ball. He had seen me play basketball out there, and he goes, good, you're going to be a left tackle. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was going to be a tight end, or I wanted to be a DN. He goes, well, I'm not the head coach. I'm just the O-line coach, but that's what you're going to play. So I thought I was talking to the head coach. It would be him. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was one of those things that it was absolutely perfect. It was a position I knew nothing about. You have to admit you know nothing. You have to immerse yourself in it. You have to be the blank slate. And I had this guy who could be my mentor. And I listened. And one of the strengths that I had identified early in my life was that I could read, I could learn, I could listen. And I shut my mouth I went into the meeting rooms. I didn't speak any of that language, and I had to learn it quick. And he took his time and taught me the game, the way coaches see it, the way quarterbacks see it, the way professionals see it. And because of that, I was fast-tracked.
Mm. Yeah, great. Well, it sure seems like it was the right track. I mean, certainly, things seem to go well from there. You ultimately are drafted to the NFL. So, tell me a little bit about kind of, was it kind of the right track? Was it bumpy? What was it like between, getting through college?
No path is smooth, correct? I mean, that's just the way it goes. You're going to have some bumps in the road. It was perfect through JC. I chose the right place to go. Like you said, I had a lot of interest from a lot of schools. I knew what I wanted and who I wanted to be around. And so I found that. And getting to the NFL now, all of a sudden, when you walk in the locker room at Arizona, I have to prove myself again. That chip's on my shoulder. And now I got to prove to myself that I can play at a big time college and not just at JC. And that happens pretty quickly. Well, it's the same when you get to that NFL locker room now, except that you're dealing with a lot more pressure, a very much different crowd of people, and a lot more testosterone than even in a college locker room. And it's sink or swim, and it's a pool of sharks at all time. So that's where that chip on my shoulder comes back into play, is that the normal locker room banter that goes on, but in an NFL is much more cutting. It's much more trying to get the other guy off his balance so that you might take a job from him, or you might, when you're in reps, he's thinking about that instead of going against you. And so it's never smooth, because you're going to have times where you fail constantly, which I did. And that goes from the start of football to my last game in the NFL. You're going to fail.
Yeah.
It's going to be bumps, but that chip is what drives you. That's not going to be the last thing somebody remembers of me.
Right. Yeah. And I think, it's an interesting thing, because maybe in certain areas that really is necessary to some degree. Maybe athletics, maybe business. I mean, this is something I've grappled with, as my chips have started to fade as well. Like, I don't know. Do I need that? Is that something I need, that edge? And I've ultimately kind of decided that it doesn't matter if I need it or not. If that's what's necessary and I'm not feeling it, then it's just not going to be, right? But there is some degree, at that level, that it might be necessary.
I think that it's probably necessary for success in any large endeavor. I think what happens is if when I'm talking about personal problems with it, that's one thing. But if it's like you're saying, if it's a business, if it's work, if it's what you're most concerned with, and you don't have it, it's going to be very tough, I think, to succeed at what you're doing. So that's external. Internally is where I think you have to let it go sometimes. I think the external force will tell me when it's necessary. If I care that much, it's going to be there. That chip's going to be there if I care. Mm-hmm. I think all of us, and more importantly than anything, myself, I know there are times personally I got to let that chip go. That's not doing me any favors right now. And that is the balance I think everybody has to walk. The yin and the yang is what's my exterior driving force that gets me where I want to be, but interior, how can I maintain kind of a truth and not turn into something I don't want to be.
Yep, got it. So, all right, you're now drafted by the Buffalo Bills. I think 1990, right? Yep. You get drafted by the Bills, and you're going to the next level. Tell me what's that like? What's that transition like? What's it like to have arrived in the NFL? Do you feel like you've achieved a success, or are you feeling like you still have a lot to prove? Talk to me about now what it's like to be in the NFL.
If you're honest, you immediately take stock of everybody around you, and you think, am I going to make this team? And third rounders, they say, oh, you're going to make the team. But that's not necessarily true. And if you're driven and you have that chip, you're going to look. So it's a whole process. It's that take stock, use your chip. Do I want to start? I'm going to start. And you have to do that every year. That's not something that ever goes away because every year they're bringing in guys to take your job. So I don't know that I ever felt I made it. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. But what I did know is when I got to that locker room and we're doing mini camps, one thing that I had learned early on from that first coach is I watched footwork. I watched how guys moved. Could they move athletically? And I looked at myself. I said, okay. I called my agent. I said, how's this schedule? Our contract coming? So, well, it depends. What do you think? You think you're going to play? I go, yeah, I'm going to play, and I hope I start. And he was like, are you sure? Because I'll structure this differently, but I don't do that normally. I said, I'm sure. So he structured it so that I got tons of these bonuses and rollovers, and I hit them all, every one of them. And all of that came because way back when I learned that you walk in, have that chip, look around, who am I better than? Who do I need to catch? And you start doing that right from the get-go in an NFL locker room. And you can't be intimidated. You got to say, okay. So you start watching film, and then you're getting out on the field. You're like, okay, that guy's kind of clumsy. That guy can't remember what the hell the play is. Mm-hmm. So you start putting yourself in this pecking order right away and figuring out, can I get in that top 5? And I knew before we ever went to camp, I was in the top 5.
Mm-hmm. So to me, this is like an intelligence thing too, right? Like, is everybody doing it, or is this like you're just using your mind now to kind of analyze the field and see kind of what you need to be doing, and then strategically doing it? I mean, or is that kind of common in the locker room?
I think it's a real mixed bag. I think there are guys like me that do that. And I think the people who stick around the longest do that. I think there's a lot of guys get there and they are so used to being told they're great and they got drafted. They're in the NFL. They're not thinking of numbers. They're not looking at the total roster numbers, how many breakdown of each position, where they're going to fall. They're not paying attention to the body language of the coaches and the way the coaches use their voice inflection around them or not. Those are all things that I think, being the youngest in my household, taught me about communication. Is understanding the nuance in a conversation a lot of times is very important. And I was always very good at knowing where I stood within an organization. And that goes on beyond the coaches. It goes on to the language used in the media from the head coach and the GMs. And you start getting a feeling of where you stand on a team pretty quick. And mm-hmm. I knew, for instance, 7 years later, I knew when I was going to be released. I was a salary cap guy. Mm-hmm. And one of the coaches bet me good money I would never be released. He ended up paying, said, how'd you know? I said, the writing was on the wall. Here's, I could tell. It's just knowing the way communication words, it's not a paranoia. It's just being able to put the clues together to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah. That's just a unique ability, really, is what it is. That's not something everybody can do. You can. Okay. So let me ask you, so you go on to the Super Bowl. What year is your first Super Bowl?
My first year. I went to the Super Bowl. I went to the Super Bowl my first 4 years in the league. Yeah.
Wow. And so what's that like? You're 4 years in a row playing in the Super Bowl. I mean, your rookie year, you're on that stage. What was that like?
First off, I like to say that the reason the Bills went to 4 straight is they drafted me and I started right away. So I was the difference in all those teams.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah.
But, you don't realize it until you look back what it was like. When you're there, you're so concerned with getting your job done week to week, not getting cut, not getting beat, not screwing up. And you get there and now you got this break. And I remember we lost the Super Bowl. And I went back to Huntington Beach, California, where I'm from. And I sat there just kind of get myself ready. I took a week and just took bike rides and things. I got to get back. I got to go. I had to go back and lift. And people were like, why are you going back? I said, I got to make the team. And they're like, but you were starting. You're set. Your mindset, I don't know. I never got to really enjoy that first Super Bowl because I was so concerned with just making the team again. And it felt like that is exactly what happened to all 4 of them. I look back now and go, man, I was a part of 4 great teams. There's incredible memories. I can remember all the stories and I laugh and me and my buddies will talk about it. But at the time, I was way too busy being scared to death I was going to get cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really think about that until later in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I think it's kind of a good look into the realities of it, because I think as a fan, right, and that never being anywhere near close to that experience, I'm thinking about the stage, the limelight, the theatrics, the, kind of intensity, the big goal of trying to win a championship and the fun of it, Super Bowl week, right? All the things leading up to it. But the truth is like that was your job. And you were worried, week to week, year to year, if you were going to have your job. And I think that's probably way more common. It's not as talked about as much because the people that are really front and center are guys that aren't really that worried about losing their jobs, right? There's a lot of guys on that roster that are like you that were just thinking, and you're starting, you're playing, but you're still worried about it.
So I could take a picture off my wall that was taken in September of the Buffalo Bills of that year, and I could show you our Super Bowl photo, and there are about half the guys gone from that first photo, and they're replaced by a new bunch of guys. That is the reality of NFL. Everybody likes to say, guys average this long. Well, of course, the superstars, the people last a long time that If you take out guys like me that last more than 10 years, the average career is less than a year. Guys don't get on the roster long. They're there for a few games and they're gone. And that turnover is so strong, it played in my head in a big way early in my career. Later on, you realize it's what it is and away you go. Yeah. But I can say this. I remember those Super Bowls. I remember the stage, and it was absolutely fantastic. To be sitting on the sideline while Whitney Houston is singing the Star Spangled Banner is amazing. To come out of the tunnel and Michael Jackson's playing the halftime. You're like, wow, look at there. That's quite the show or whatever it is.
Right.
But you're so caught up in I got that guy and I got this play and I look back and it's the greatest experience of my life. And I still remember the plays. I remember the games. But at the time, you're too busy thinking about the next play and the next thing to even get caught up in those emotions. You've got to just go. You're just going as hard as you can, as fast as you can, tunnel vision to win a game.
Yeah. And I know that there's some accolades that come your way along the way. You are named MVP by your teammates, the only offensive lineman in team history to be named MVP, the Ed Block Courage Award from the NFL. I mean, you were recognized in a really unique way. Talk to me a little bit about why you think that was. What was it about you that really became, from this boy who maybe was in the outside looking in to a real leader in your locker room and in the league? Tell me about that.
Well, as an offensive lineman, it's service leadership. You're not in front and center leadership. You're a guy that does. And offensive linemen by our nature, we're pretty unselfish. We're all about 5 guys. And the 5 guys have to work as one in order to make anything happen. And selfishness can creep in the NFL because you're keeping your job. It's all about your job. So what ended up happening that year, because I had played multiple positions throughout my career, I played left tackle and I played right guard and right tackle. I was the starting tackle, and they had drafted a tackle that was supposed to be a left tackle for us. And during the season, we lost a left guard, and he went down. We really didn't have a backup for him. And so what ended up happening is I looked, and I knew that the guy they drafted couldn't play left tackle, but he could probably play right tackle. So I went to the coach and said, listen, why don't I move the left guard, bring him in at tackle because he can't play guard. And we did it for a week or two. It wasn't working out. So we flipped. Well, then in the middle of the season, left tackle goes down. So I moved out to left tackle because I was the only person with tackle experience. And I played a lot of tackle. And the reason they voted that, I guess, is because I had to do it in multiple games, during games, and I did it without worrying about my career. I wasn't worried that, I'm a left tackle or I'm a right tackle. I'm not moving. That's my job. And, you look back after 12 years, you go, did it cost me? No, I played 12 years. probably cost me a little money here and there where I could have stayed in one job. But what it gained for me was, the respect of my teammates, the respect of when I say the thing about being voted MVP is you're not voted MVP by the press. It's not by the fans. It was my teammates who did. They thought I was the most valuable player that year on that squad. And we were a really good Chiefs team. And so I felt great about that. That was a better payday than anything I could have got.
Yeah, those are the best kind of compliments, the ones that really come from your peers that are seeing you every day and recognize you. So, says a lot about you. And I have to ask, because I believe just in, having spoken to you today and hearing kind of your story and your journey and knowing how you continue to succeed in new and different ways, that there was a silver lining to the Super Bowl losses. Obviously a win is a win, a championship is a championship, a ring is a ring. But, I'm wondering how you see the silver linings in the losses and what that really has maybe given you, maybe more even than what a championship would have.
Well, that's really good. So not just last week, someone was asking me, God, that just sucks to lose 5 Super Bowls. I lost 4 with the Bills and 1 with the Giants. I go, no, are you kidding me? I don't want to bring it up and make you mad. I said, you don't make me mad. You make me really happy. And he says, why? I said, I was a part of 5 great teams, 5 teams full of great people, great memories, that worked together at the highest level for the highest goal, and we came 1 game short. Everybody in the NFL loses the Super Bowl except the winner of the Super Bowl. All 31 teams. And yet I got to be that number 2 team 5 times. Yeah, I never won it, but that's not what I take away. I take away those 5 great squads, great guys, great memories. That's the silver lining, is that I every year I can look and go, hey, I was better than most of the NFL. And I can look at a lot of my teammates later on in my career that never got to a Super Bowl. Think of the great players that never got to play in one. I played in 5.
Right.
And if you ask me tomorrow, hey, we're going to give you 1 rep and you're going to play in a Super Bowl, but you only got about a 1% chance or less of winning, I'm in.
Yeah.
Give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really like a much more healthy, obviously, but it's really just true. The amount of the rare air that you're in to get there once, to play in the NFL at all, to get there 2 times, 3 times, 5 times is unbelievably rare air. And you can't say anything but, in my mind, look how much success, look what I have accomplished. I mean, and I know that most people, or many at least, a lot, wouldn't look at it that way. They'd say, oh, I lost. But I mean, I just think it's true for you to process it the way you are, much healthier. And really, I think, that's how life is. You get to choose. How am I going to frame this up? How am I going to, there's not one truth. The truth is for you to decide. And in this case, you decided that it was a hell of an experience, one that most people never got to have. And it was a great thing.
All of life, and you just said it best. And the way I say it, all of life is an event and how we respond to it. And that gives us the outcome we want. That's just life. That's Jack Canfield in a nutshell right there.
Yeah.
Is, hey, this event happened and how I respond to it is going to be my outcome. And I could respond, this is the worst thing that ever happened. And instead, I would then be a bitter ex-football player that can't see the good I was able to be a part of. And I don't choose to do that, they say nobody remembers second place. And I said, well, it's funny, if I asked who was the quarterback of those Bills teams, even non-football fans, a lot of them know Jim Kelly, right? But if I asked who was the quarterback in the 95 Super Bowl, the next one, most people lost. Most people couldn't name it. One time. So, hey, there's the silver lining. We're at least famous. People know us. We're the Bills.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, I grew up watching those teams. Those were memorable years, and it was really a kind of special time that the Bills were in it every year and losing. And it wasn't just that they were losing; that became the story. But until that became the story, it was like this Bills team is special. I mean, they're right there every year. If you think about it today, I mean, that is really unique to go to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row.
Yeah, and it's when you just said it best. Back at the time, it became that joke. But through the fog of time now and through a longer lens, we realize how incredibly special it was for a team to get there 4 years in a row. And will it ever be accomplished again? Probably
what was
not.
Marv Levy like as a coach?
Marv was special. And
Yeah.
I don't think you'll find anybody that played for Marv didn't think that. And, to me, everybody can name one thing they loved about Marv, his sense of humor or this or that. But in my mind, what made him special were two qualities. He let his coaches coach. He didn't get in there and try to tell people how to coach. But he had a way of communicating through one sentence something that meant something really deep to one player and that maybe this player at least understood. You're dealing with 53 different personalities on a team, 53 different levels of education and intelligence. And he could take a sentence and it could mean multiple things within the same vein to everybody on the team. And that was a really incredible way he had of communicating.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that by itself, a hell of experience. I mean, he was just so well respected and really loved, and to be able to learn from him. Glenn, talk to me a little bit about your back at your alma mater in Tucson. A place that I spent some time and love dearly, and I see you wearing the shirt. I know you take a lot of pride. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now and kind of how all of this life experience has really led you to today.
Well, I did broadcast for a lot of years and I loved it. But my children, my two youngest, were playing sports that are fall sports. And when you're doing football on TV, you're going to miss all of that. And so I felt like, okay, now's the time to make a change. And they had come to me and kind of given me this opportunity. They wanted help with alumni relations and fundraising. And I had never done anything like that before. Fundraising, alumni relations is easy. I love to meet people and hear their stories. And so that's been the really easy part. But what it also allowed me to do is time to coach. And when I retired, I didn't want to coach. I was asked to coach by one of the teams that I had been on in the NFL. And I just knew I wanted to be around my children. I didn't want to be an absent dad. And I learned through raising 4 children how different people learn. And not everybody learns the same way. And that led me into coaching. And so it was really a nice opportunity for me to work at the university and be around alumni relations, go travel, meet our alumni and hear their stories. But it also gave me time on the side to coach and be around young men and try to help them through life. And you're a football coach. Yeah, you're helping them in football, trying to get them to see the bigger picture in football. But at the same time, you're also adding those life lessons and trying to lift up these young men. And Tucson's a mixed bag as far as socioeconomics. And so we have some kids from broken homes and some kids from very rough backgrounds, and trying to get them into the fold and have them become part of a team and care about the team and just trying to help them become a good young man in society. And I took to trying to lift up those kids and be something better for them.
Yeah, it's great. Great work. Well, I'm glad you're doing it where you're doing it and finding the balance between, being a father and a husband and supporting so many young people using this experience really to give back to other people is really kind of the ultimate fulfilling work for me. I know I happen to get more pleasure now out of supporting other people, coaching other people, really, kind of investing in them, maybe, just as much as I do kind of my own endeavors. It's really fulfilling work. So awesome. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, what you just said there is something I live by is we always want to be the hero in our own story. But if you know that track, right, you're a hero because you have a mentor, and then you reach your goal, and it's your turn to be the mentor to the next hero. And I'm done being a hero, man. I just want to be a mentor and help these kids. So
that's great. Well, Glenn, any final thoughts? Anything you want to wrap up with as we come to a close here? I really enjoyed talking with you and hearing your story. And anything you want to kind of share with the audience in closing?
No, I really don't. Thank you. I would say this, and this just goes to my time in the league, but just as a human, it's one of my favorite quotes about life is don't be a tourist in life, be a traveler. Tourists see what they came to see, and travelers kind of pay attention to everything around them.
That's wonderful. Good final thoughts. Glenn, thanks again. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well. Thanks.